If you're watching this channel, you already understand that history isn't nostalgia, it's a manual. Before we get into today's subject, make sure you're subscribed to Iron Age Instincts and, share this with someone who still thinks winter gardening is a modern luxury. What I'm about to walk you through kept families fed under blackout conditions, rationing and fuel shortages, and honestly, every technique still works right now if you're serious about food resilience. During the Second World War, cold frames were not hobby projects. They were survival infrastructure. Britain, parts of occupied Europe, and even North America relied on low-tech growing systems to stretch calories and vitamins through winter. January greens were not a bonus. They were the difference between health and deficiency. Many of these methods disappeared once cheap energy and global supply chains took over, but the physics never stopped working. Why wartime cold frames mattered more than greenhouses ever could. Glass greenhouses existed, but fuel and glass were scarce. Cold frames won because they trapped solar heat without consuming coal or electricity. The key lesson here is efficiency over comfort. A cold frame doesn't fight winter. It exploits small daily temperature gains and protects soil biology. When applied today, this means you don't need heaters, only discipline in placement, insulation and timing. How sunken frames used earth as free thermal mass. One of the most effective World War II techniques was sinking the cold frame below ground level. Gardeners dug down 1 to 2 feet using the surrounding soil as insulation. The earth stays warmer than the air, even in January. To apply this today, dig your frame into the south-facing side of a garden bed or slope, line the sides with brick, stone or packed clay, and cap it with glass or polycarbonate. This alone can raise nighttime temperatures by several degrees. The reason angle glazing was calculated, not just guessed, is all down to those old wartime manuals. They specified that glazing angles should match the path of the winter sun, and, the frames were much steeper than what you see in modern kits, often between 35 and 45 degrees. This wasn't about looks, not at all. A steep angle really maximized the low-angle sunlight and helped shed snow quickly. So today you can measure your winter sun angle or honestly just tilt the lid aggressively toward the south. This single adjustment, more often than not, determines whether your greens survive a hard frost. Here's how double-layer glass and air gaps actually replaced insulation boards back in the day. When those insulation boards weren't available, gardeners would use 2 layers of glass with a trapped air gap in between. Air, when it doesn't circulate, is a surprisingly excellent insulator. You can replicate this nowadays using storm windows, salvage panes, or even clear plastic stretched over a secondary inner frame. The trick, really, is sealing the edges to keep out drafts. And this technique alone can protect spinach and mush well below freezing. There's a reason manure-heated frames produced food even when the fuel ran out. Hotbeds were still pretty common in the Second World War. Fresh horse or cattle manure was layered beneath the soil, generating a gentle heat as it decomposed. This wasn't just sloppy composting, no, it was controlled biological heating. To use this today, lay about 12 inches of fresh manure mixed with straw, tamp it down, then add 6 inches of soil on top and let it settle for a week before planting. Even in January, this method can keep the root zones above freezing for weeks. You know, when it came to surviving those harsh winters, night insulation was actually more important than daytime heat. Wartime gardeners, they really focused on nighttime protection. Every evening they'd layer straw mats, old blankets, sackcloth, and even newspapers over frames. Then, during the day, everything came off again. This daily ritual, well, it was all about preventing heat loss, not gaining heat. If you're thinking of applying this now, just remember to keep your insulation removable and, dry. Cover at dusk, uncover mid-morning. And honestly, consistency matters more than material quality. Now, you might wonder why the soil depth was deliberately kept shallow for winter greens. Well, deep soil, you see, stays cold for much longer. During the war, cold frames often used just a thin layer of soil so it could warm up quickly, even on those short, gloomy winter days. Greens, like lettuce, arugula and mustard, they don't really need deep roots anyway. So today you'll want to keep your winter frame soil to, about 6 inches, right over a bit of insulation or compost. The faster your soil warms, the faster your greens will grow, even when there's not much sunlight to go around. When it came to choosing crops during the war, there really was no room for failure. Folks didn't gamble with untested plants in January. Every crop was picked because it could handle the cold, the low light, and the slow pace of winter growth. That's why spinach, lamb's lettuce, claytonia, and endive were the stars of the cold frames. The lesson here is simple. Only plant winter varieties you know will survive. If the seed packet doesn't clearly say it can handle frost, well, it doesn't belong in your January frame. Ventilation in cold frames was used sparingly and always with purpose. Believe it or not, cold frames can rot crops faster than the cold can kill them. Wartime guides always stressed a bit of midday ventilation on sunny days, just a few minutes with the lid propped open, never hours. That little bit of fresh air stopped fungus from taking hold, but didn't let out all the precious warmth. These days, only crack the lid when there's heavy condensation inside, and be sure to close it before the temperature drops again. Now, to keep the harvest going under rationing, gardeners didn't pick everything at once. Instead, they sowed small patches week by week in autumn. By the time January rolled around, the frames held greens at all different stages. That way you could harvest steadily without having to replant in frozen ground. You'll want to do the same, sow every 10 to 14 days from late summer into early fall, and then just pick what you need through the winter. These methods, well, they got people through bombing raids, fuel shortages, and rationing. They weren't fashionable, and they certainly weren't optional. If you put together sunken frames, angled glass, a bit of night insulation, and the right crops, you can still cut fresh greens in January, with nothing but hand tools and a bit of grit. So, if this kind of practical history speaks to you, go ahead and subscribe to Iron Age Instincts, and maybe share it with someone who thinks resilience is all about technology instead of knowledge. The truth is, history already solved this problem. All we need to do is remember how to use it.